Hey everyone, hope you're having a lovely bank holiday Monday. We're doing our latest historic weather video here at gasovers.com. Today, we're looking at winter of 1984. 1985, it was a cold winter, another one of those cold winters in 1980s. We've already done 81, 82, and 86, 87. Both of those were cold winters, of course. You can find the links to them on the historic weather videos page, and you find that from the button at the top of the page. So this is another one from the 1980s to add to the mix, looking at 84, 85. Hope it brings back hope it brings back a few memories for you. Just to say, also here on the homepage today and for the rest of the week is the video just looking at our methodology for the winter forecast, because we'll be starting the winter forecast next week, next Sunday. So I just wanted to do a quick video sort of explaining what we look at through the autumn in terms of the winter forecast, and you can find that here on the homepage as well. Both of these videos, that video and this historic video, will be kept on the homepage for the next few days because I'm going away for a few days. So if you can't watch this or the other video in one sitting, don't worry, you'll be able to come back at any point through the coming week, up to Friday anyway, and watch this video at any point. So it's going to be kept around the homepage for the rest of the week, and then it'll be on the historic page anyway after that, so it'll be kept around the website indefinitely, basically. Before I get on with that, just got to say about the ads. This link's article on all pages at gasovers.com. Have a browse widgets if there's any articles that you're interested in. Please click through your article and read the article, and thanks very much for doing that. This video ads on most of the page, so open up your content, then when you watch them, they'll close back up again. Thanks so much for getting involved and doing that. These historic videos wouldn't be possible without two resources and two websites. The first is the Historic Archive from wetessential.de. You find the link to Wet Essential on the links page. The Historic Archive goes back to 1871. So you while away many a rainy bank holiday Monday looking at those charts, and I have done myself. Going to be one of those sort of days today, probably. So do check out the Historic Archive, West Central. Also, Professor Trevor Harley's website. A lot of the information that I give you in this video, but goes with the charts. A lot of things that you hear have come from Trevor Harley's personal weather website, and you can find the link to Trevor Harley's website and wetessential.de on the links page. Thanks so much to those two websites. As I always say when I do these historic videos, they would not be possible without these websites and their wonderful information. Right, let's get on with it. I've rambled on for long enough. It's going to be a pretty long video. Anyway, we're going to start in October 1984. I want to start in October, and the reason I'm doing that is because in many ways this winter is a little bit similar to 78, 79, maybe not quite as cold as 78, 79, but it does have some similarities, and particularly in the autumn when it's very warm really in the autumn. I just want to emphasise the point that what you get in the autumn does not necessarily mean you're going to get the same in the winter, and we saw it in 78, 79, had a really warm autumn and a very cold winter. We're going to see it again for this one. So we start in October 1984. Now September 84 had been pretty wet and changeable, quite cool. October 84 was actually warm and unsettled and quite wet at times. The central temperature for this month comes out at 11.1. So this is indicative really for the month as a whole. On the 1st of October, with low pressure sort of dominating the weather. We go through to the 5th, same very unsettled. This bringing heavy rain to the south of the country, this area of low pressure. And then go through to the 10th, and we're bringing in sort of balmy westerly, southwesterly winds with high pressure to the south. That brought some very warm air across the country on the 10th. Move through to the 14th, a little bit of an Indian summer taking place here with the high pressure building across northern parts of France and dragging up this very warm air out of the Azores, as these areas of low pressure are out to the north and the west of the country. But let's go through to the 17th. This high pressure is sort of eroded as low pressure starts to come in from the Atlantic. And then we go very unsettled again through to the final stages of the month with this deep area of low pressure over Scandinavia on the 21st. Wet and windy weather coming in through the country throughout that final week of October. This is the 28th, and we see we're bringing up a long effect southwesterly here with high pressure, with Central Europe low pressure in the Atlantic is following the isobars back. The air is originating from the Azores, so very warm, balmy air pushed up across the country, but also very wet with weather fronts within the flow. The final day of October 84 remains warm and changeable, really. This is Halloween, and again wet and windy up in the north, and quite wet down in the south, but also very mild. Again, front of the isobars back, the air is originating somewhere well to the south of the country. So pretty mild October and a pretty warm November as well. Central temperature for November comes out at 8.0, so a proper warmer than average month. It was mild and wet, and a very wet month in Aberdeen as well. Now here we are on the 1st of November, and it's also the case for the 2nd of November. We bring up this long fetch southwesterly. These days saw temperature going up to 19 Celsius across parts of London and eastern England. So really almost summer-like temperatures to start November 1984. Things cool down a little bit for bonfire night though. We bring this low pressure through and pull the winds into a northerly direction and build a bit of a ridge down from the north. This is interesting actually, because even at this point, bonfire night, maybe just signs that things are a little bit different for this winter compared to the normal winter pattern. Certainly high pressure ridging out of the Arctic here down into Iceland and pulling winds into north. I remember this bonfire night quite well. I was 7 years old when all this was going on, but I do remember this bonfire night being pretty cold and frosty, a proper classic frosty, foggy sort of bonfire night. That doesn't last very long though. The high pressure soon starts receding back to the north again as low pressure starts to push up from the south, bringing a lot of wet weather as we move through into the 7th of November. Going through to the 9th, this is quite interesting. This point around the 9th, 10th, got low pressure around the country. Follow the isobars back. The air here is originating from North Africa, so we're bringing up Saharan dust here with this southerly wind, and also the rain is bringing that dust down onto sort of street and ground level. So there was sort of a dust rain around this point, the 9th, 10th of November 1984. That's quite interesting and unusual to get that in November, to be honest. It's something you tend to associate more with spring and summer, bringing the air up from the Sahara, but here we are with it happening in November. Now, if I'm at high pressure going up towards Scandinavia here on the 10th, again, maybe just signs that things are a little bit different this year. So got lots of above average heights here to the east and the northeast as we go through to the 13th of November, and these areas of low pressure are trying to come in off the Atlantic, but they're sort of being blocked by this area of high pressure. It's all very mild still at this point, with lots of heavy rain coming in across the country, but it could just be signs, I think, this, and I remember it at the time actually, watching the BBC weather forecast, and I just remember even that had a little bit of a weather brain. Just remember thinking that this is a little bit different, how I've got this ridging out to the east and the northeast of the country. I think my dad mentioned it. As we go through to the 17th of November, we find the low pressure actually being deflected southwards. So again, perhaps just signs that the jet stream is beginning to act a little bit differently. Instead of going like its normal southwest to northeast trajectory, it's going more sort of northwest to southeasterly direction. It's taking this low pressure down to the south. So actually this high over Scandinavia is winning the battle a little bit, albeit it's not cold at this point. It's generally is still mild, but lots and lots of heavy rain. It really was a very wet month, particularly for the east of the country. Now moving to the 20th, and the Atlantic starts to break through properly then, all of this ridging over Scandinavia and to the north, which is sort of implying what's going to happen in a few weeks' time. But at this point, it's actually starting to lose its strength, and low pressure comes in off the Atlantic, bringing stormy conditions as we go through the 21st into the 22nd of November. A proper stormy, wet and windy push with gales, particularly out in the west of the country. And then that takes us through to a very mild unsettled end to November. There's barely been a frost here. We get through to the 30th of November 1984, and we've barely had a frost up to this point. Never mind snow. It's just been mild conditions all the way, except around bonfire night. A little snap around the 4th, 5th, which did produce some frosty, sort of foggy conditions just for a night or two. But generally, there's barely been a frost throughout the whole of this autumn, and we ended on a very mild note. Throw the isobars back, the areas originating again from the Azores, Spain, Portugal, but loads of wet weather sweeping up across the country as well. So very mild but wet and windy end to November 84. And this takes us through into the start of the winter. So here we go, moving through into winter. This is the 1st of December 1984, and we start the winter, which is going to progress very cold. Don't worry, we'll get some very interesting charts in a moment. If you're wondering what all the fuss is about, you'll see some interesting charts soon. But we start December 1984 on a classically wet and windy note once again. We move through the first week and it stays pretty mild and wet. Notice again lots of ridging to the east, sort of holding up these areas of low pressure. So it's unusually wet really through this period. These weather fronts are not able to progress out of the country as they would normally do in a typical west-east zonal flow. They're sort of being held up by all of this ridging to the east, albeit it is still not particularly cold. Now, move through to the 7th of December. We actually get a little colder snap here, but it doesn't come from a classic cold scenario. What happens is high pressure starts to push up from the south, the mid-latitude, sort of faux cold type scenario. I don't really believe in faux cold, but it's been termed on the forums that when you get this sort of high pressure building up from the south, you get an inversion underneath it, so it's warm a lot, but it's cold and frosty and foggy on the surface under these sort of mid-latitude highs. And some people think this is sort of faux or fake cold, but cold is cold as far as I'm concerned. If it's -4 and warm aloft, if it's -4 and cold aloft, it doesn't really make much difference. It still is -4. So here we are on the 11th of December 1984, and we have a really cold day actually here, with widespread widespread fog and some pretty frosty conditions as well. But this doesn't last very long, and that high pressure quickly pushes away to the east again, so winds go back into the south, clears all that fog away. And what happens now is that it turns very mild again, because it's been warm aloft all the way along, and that warm air sinks back down into the surface as the cold air on the surface sort of swept away. So we get temperatures going up to 17 degrees here at Cape Wrath on the 13th of December 1984. And then the Atlantic sort of comes back in again as we go through into the middle part of the month, but notice again the high pressure is in there over Scandinavia, holding up the progress of these Atlantic weather systems on the 17th. Very wet and windy. I remember this actually a little bit. There was just the chance that the winds could have gone into the east here, that the Atlantic would have lost the battle. That was sort of the idea from the BBC forecast around this period, that this high pressure over Scandinavia was going to win the battle, turn winds into the east. Actually doesn't happen, and the Atlantic just breaks through, really pushes that high pressure back into Siberia. So we've had one go at getting the Scandinavian high to dominate, getting the winds into the east. It hasn't come off, and we go through to 20th of December, and we're in this mild westerly flow. This actually looks a bit zonal here, with intense polar vortex around Greenland and Iceland, and a strong Azores high. Very mild westerly wind came through. Christmas Eve, 1984, looks like this. Still very mild, nothing really going on. If you want cold weather, look how the mild air is going into Scandinavia and pushed up into the Arctic. A little bit of warm air advection beginning to take place. So the Siberian high is beginning to pump up to 1,050 millibars. It doesn't mean anything for us though, because it still is generally mild, wet and windy, and it stays unsettled as we go through into Christmas Day. It was a mild Christmas in 1984, and it stays unsettled and mild as we move through into Boxing Day as well. Notice, however, that this high pressure over Western Russia is beginning to retrogress towards Scandinavia, so this low pressure is starting to be held up. This is really where things begin to develop between Christmas and New Year, we find this deep area of low pressure and polar vortex stalling to the south of Greenland as this ridge over Russia begins to push back in towards Scandinavia, and that starts to force the jet stream and the area of low pressure that's been around over Christmas starts to force it southwards on the 27th of December. Still pretty mild at this point, but then we start to turn things colder, and it happens like that, very suddenly. We begin to get a bit of a ridge building up across the country. The high pressure is pushing into Scandinavia, so the Atlantic now is being broken. We're breaking the Atlantic flow as this high pressure builds through the country. It's turning frosty. It was a frosty into December in 1984. Not snowy, but there was frost as these areas of high pressure just builds and pushes up towards Scandinavia. So the low pressure, as I say, it's around Greenland Island, it's stalled, the Atlantic is being broken, and all the heights are pushing to the east. Like a wall of high pressure, if you like, just building to the east of the country, ridging through the country, so frost, some fog around at this point as well. We end December 1984, this is New Year's Eve, and we're bringing a low pressure through the country within this high pressure. So it's pretty cold, there's quite a lot of frost and fog around. No real snow, maybe a little bit of wintry stuff up in the north of this area of low pressure, but not particularly cold even at this point, just sort of frost and general winter fare. The central England temperature for December 1984 was 5.2, but as we go through into January, we get a much colder scenario developing now. So we're going into the winter proper. The central England temperature for January 1984 was very cold at 0.8, so it's sort of a freezing type central England temperature, bitterly cold month, and there was 3 weeks of snow through the first 3 weeks of the month. So we're on the 1st of January, New Year's Day, and this low pressure is running down the North Sea as this ridge is building to the west and the north of the country. We're beginning to pull down proper cold air from the north right now. And then we go into a proper sort of blocked scenario on the 2nd of January. Take that high pressure up to the north of the country. It goes up to the north of Scandinavia. It's actually linking back into an Arctic high. Notice very, very cold air now plunging south out of the Arctic through most of Europe, turning bitterly cold and snowy with these areas of low pressure. And things just get colder then as we progress through the first week. This blocking feature really starts to take over. The cold air sitting to the east, a deep cold pool starting to push further towards us. So by the time we go through to the 5th of January, we're in a proper cold scenario now. All of those mild winds and all of the bands of rain that we've had throughout the autumn, it's all gone, and the Atlantic is broken. We're in a proper blocked cold pattern. How is that? What do you think to that? For proper northern blocking around Greenland and Iceland. Look how bitterly cold it is across many, many parts of Central and Eastern Europe. This day, the 5th of January, saw heavy snow down in Kent and a maximum temperature of -4 degrees, can you believe? And it gets even colder through the first week, so the morning of the 7th comes out with a minimum temperature of -16 across some parts of Kent. These are the upper air temperatures. You can see how severely cold it is across many parts of Europe. That cold air is digging in from the east with snow, introducing that severely cold air, pushing across the country from the east. We go through to the 6th, and very much a block scenario with the high pressure centred around Iceland. Severely cold air across many parts of the country with snow. These kinks in the ice bars, the elongations here, kinky ice bars, indicating troughs coming through the country, producing heavy snow, particularly in the east. There was 25 centimetres of snow at Ramsgate. Deep snow cover from this area of low pressure just here. And as I say, the minimum temperature on the morning of the 8th, on the morning of the 7th into the 8th, was -16 degrees down in the southeast of the country under that very deep snow cover. Again, there's the extent of the cold pool with those upper air temperatures. We've got the -15 isotherm moving into the country from the east. We don't see that all that often. And again, through to the 8th, very cold, severely cold upper air temperatures. This is the slotted pattern for the 8th. Again, we've got ridging out to the north, but there's also kinks within the ice bars, just indicating bands of snow coming down across the country. I remember this so well this winter. I was 7 years old, but there is a picture of me somewhere standing waist deep in snow. I wanted to try and get that picture up for you. I thought it'd be funny to put it in, but sadly I can't find it. I'm not sure where it is, but I do remember it very, very well. One of the interests that sort of winters that sort of got my interest going really in the weather. These 1980s winters starting with 81 and 81, 82 and going through to 87. These were the winters that sort of got my interest in the weather and got me hooked into all of this nonsense that I do every day on the website. So for the 10th of January, we start to lose the severity of the cold, but really sort of collapsing across the country. We're losing risk of snow. It's turning sort of frosty, very frosty at night, but not much snow going on, and a little bit less cold by day. But by the 13th, the high pressure goes back to Scandinavia again, and the winds are coming back in from the east. So severely cold, low-level continental air starts to come back in from the east. And the 13th of January, introduces probably the coldest part of the winter, actually. Through this middle part of January, we sort of get maximum temperatures of around -6 degrees across parts of Kent, around Brighton, -6 degrees of the maximum on the 16th. Then on the 17th, those severely cold maximum temperatures spread to Shrewsbury and Wittering. So maximum of -5, -6, quite widespread here through the middle part of the month, with this intense cold pool again coming in from the east, and there's snow as well pushing in from the east, introducing this severely cold air back in off the continent on those easterly winds. So this is the day that produces maxima of -6, one of the coldest days of the 20th century, down in the south of the country. And then as we go through to the 17th, we find that those severely cold maximums sort of spread a little bit further northwest into parts of Wales and the Midlands. When you think that we had this depth of severe cold, and then we have very similar, in fact a little bit more severe cold in January 1987, and then we had it again in February 1991. So this period around the middle of the 1980s through to the 1990s is quite unusual, really, for so much severe cold, so many severe cold days. And as I say, this is one of the coldest days of the 20th century that we've got going on here on the 17th of January 1985. Now things are going to moderate a little bit as we go beyond this, so we move through to the 19th, and it's still a very blocked scenario, the blocking perhaps getting more severe over Greenland, but the low pressure is gathering out in the Atlantic, and what happens is that through the final week to 10 days, this low pressure starts to break through. Now famously, the Met Office have forecast this freeze to go on through to the end of January in their long-range forecast. It's been one of those sort of mishaps that occurs occasionally. There was an amateur forecaster, I can't quite remember his name, it might have been Bill Foggett, I'm not quite sure, there's 2 or 3 of them around at this time, but amateur forecaster said, no, Metal's got this wrong, we're going to get a 4 episode, but winter will come back in February, but it is going to thaw and moderate through the final week to 10 days of January, and it did. So we find heavy snow pushing in across the country, of course, blizzards, in fact, across parts of the country, but we lose the cold very gradually through the 21st and on in 22nd. These low pressures break through, turn the winds into the Atlantic. It was a very snowy breakdown, lots of heavy snow pushing into this cold air, but eventually it starts to turn back to rain, and we do start to get a thaw. Although the cold air sort of clings on into central and northern parts of Scotland throughout this period. We get a little bit of cold zonality on the 25th, and again on the 27th, as these low pressures are just pushing through, but by the 31st we're breaking the Atlantic through properly. Nevertheless, the north did hang on to the cold air right through to the end of January 1985. So we have maximums I should say minimums of -19, -22, and -23 around Aviemore and Braemar on the nights of the 25th, 26th, and 27th of January. But by the end of the month, the cold air was even clinging on to the far north, was being pushed away by low pressure breaking through. Winter's not done yet, though. We start February on a very mild note with high pressure down to the south, low pressure pushing through off the Atlantic, but winter's not done, and we go through into the 4th, and we're going back into a block scenario. The high pressure that was across Spain and Portugal is ridging back to the east and the northeast. It's going back up towards Scandinavia. These low pressures in the Atlantic are again starting to be blocked. And we've got a deep cold pool as well waiting for us up over Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe, and lots of blocking setting up again across Greenland and to the north of the country as this low pressure in the Atlantic, proper classic negative North Atlantic oscillation here, is stalling. And we open the door again on the 7th to cold air. This is when the cold comes back from the east. It happens with this high pressure blocking to the north of the country, taking over the weather pattern, switching winds back in to the east. Very snowy scenario as we move through into the 8th. Where I am is actually the snowiest part of the winter in Northamptonshire. There's deep snow here. I think it's probably when I'm standing in that picture waist deep in snow around here, the 8th, 9th of February 1985. So from Northamptonshire, this was the snowiest part of the winter. We've got gale force southeasterly winds. We've got low pressure attacking from the southwest, bringing weather fronts in, and lots of heavy rain, which is turning to snow as it's hitting this cold air being fed in on the southeasterly wind from off the continent. Upper air temperatures are very interesting here. It's really mild down in the southwest across Ireland. There's the cold air sitting to the east of us, and it's in this green band here that got the snow going on between the 0 Celsius or plus 0 Celsius isotherm down to the south and west, and the -5 isotherm to the north and northeast. And I remember the Met Office and the BBC were forecasting just a band of rain to come across the country. I think it was Philip Eden who sort of went off on a tangent and said, no, there's going to be snow, particularly for the east, because the cold was so severe across the Low Countries. He said this southeast wind is going to undercut, and we've got risk of freezing rain, icy rain down in the south, but for eastern parts of the country there's a greater risk of heavy snow, and Philip was right with this. It was a very snowy scenario. Moving through into the 9th, weather fronts have stalled across the country, so proper blizzard going on here, heavy snow with rain turning increasingly to snow even in the south and the west of the country. You'll see that the yellow colours for 0 Celsius isotherm has now slipped away to the south, so now the green band here is seeing the snow pushing further, back further south and west, so many parts of England and Wales turning really snowy through this point. Then as the snow is done and dusted, I think there's up to about a foot of snow in some eastern and central parts of the country with this, certainly with drifting as well, whipping everything up, because once this snow has done with us and the Atlantic loses the battle, we start to bring in bitterly cold air back from the east once again. So the 10th and into the 11th, we're feeding in bitter cold air from the east as these areas of low pressure have all stalled out to the west. And again, through this period from the 9th to the 13th of February, we're seeing maximum temperatures of just -3, -4, quite widely across England and Wales. So severely cold maximum temperatures after the severe cold that we've already had in January, of course. More severely cold days through the middle part of February with deep snow cover and strong winds drifting all of that snow around through into the 14th, into Valentine's Day. We're staying very cold. We're more or less losing risk of snow. There was some snow showers, particularly in the east of the country, but the risk of snow is gone now, just severely cold by day and very cold and frosty, icy over that deep snow cover at night. And it takes until the 19th before many of us start to see temperatures rising above freezing. But it does start to happen. This high pressure begins to collapse, as it always will in the end. It will turn milder. And we go through to the 19th and we start to push up the milder air from the south and the southwest. So we lose the freeze. Still trying to keep the cold weather going. The high is in over Scandinavia. There's still deep cold to the east of Europe. But no, for now we're going to bring the winds back in from the west again. We have a milder end to February 1985, Ben. Lots of sunshine coming through, and sort of pleasant days in that sunshine, with temperatures going up almost into double figures across most parts of the country, although colder at night. Just very quick, we'll have a look at March, because again we do find the winter coming back. So we start off mild and wet through most of the first half of March. It's quite mild with high pressure down to the south, but it's one of those winters where things just keep trying to get back to a cold pattern. So the middle part of the month, we start to bring the northerly wind back down across the country again, and move through to the 15th on into the 16th. We're in a cold northerly this time, not easterly, we're in a northerly, and this low pressure bringing heavy snow across many parts of the country on the 16th of March. And it stays cold then really through into the second half of the month. More low pressure trying to come in off the Atlantic, meeting that cold air. Snow particularly in the north and the east, with this one on the 21st of March. 85. And we go through to 25th, still in a cold scenario. Central England temperature for February, I forgot to mention that, was 2.1. For March, it's 4.7. So not severely cold for these 2 months, but certainly significantly colder than average. And the greatest risk of snow in the north through March 1985 is actually in the northern part of the country as well. The Atlantic starts to break through, bring milder air in. And April, what do you think happens in April? Well, we start off on a very mild note with southwesterly winds pushed up across the country, lifting temperatures up to 20 degrees in Cromer on the 3rd. Also very wet though, these areas of low pressure. This one bringing copious amounts of rain around the 7th, 8th. Interestingly, April 1985 starts really quite warm in the first half, but the second half is much colder, and that's quite unusual for April, because it's traditionally a warming month, so it'll very often start quite cool and get much warmer as we go along, but we do things the other way around this time. So the 19th of April 85, it's very mild, with winds up to, with temperatures up to 21 Celsius around London. But by the 20th, much colder, bringing northerly winds down, and they're feeding snow showers back into the north and the east of the country. And it stays cold on and off then through to the end of the month, with further northerly shots bringing snow showers on the 25th, and again on the 27th, particularly up to the north and the east of the country, with some very unusual late season frosts as well. So that's it. That's the winter of 1984-1985 in terms of how this synopsis played out. Thought I'd just leave you with a few pictures. Hope this brought back a few memories for you of these snow events, particularly in January and February. Here we are with an old British rail train going through the snow there across, I'm not sure where that is, it's somewhere in rural England, but an old British rail train there in the snow. Here's an old bus, a green bus, driving through what looks like a very snowy afternoon, and again, I'm not sure where this is, but this was from the winter of 1985. Here's some kids skating, ice thick enough to hold weight, but of course we know, to be serious, we know that you shouldn't be doing that. If you see a frozen lake, pond, canal, whatever, don't go on it, don't skate, don't do what these kids are doing. These kids got away a bit because the ice was thick enough, but there's no way of knowing whether the ice is going to be thick enough or not to bear your weight. So to be serious, just a second, please do not do what those children are doing, and do not skate on frozen water. But anyway, they got away a bit, and it looks like they're having a good time there skating in the ice. Snowy scene there with somebody walking with their children through, again, what looks like rural part of the country. This, I think, is the football ground of York before the FA Cup match between York City and Arsenal. And I believe that York City won this match But quite how it went ahead, I'm not sure, because that was like a very, very frozen pitch to me. But there we go, everybody's pitching in and helping to clear the snow out of the way, and it paid off because there was a famous victory for those York City fans. And then finally, this is somebody digging their car out of a huge snowdrift. I'm not sure whether this is in January or February 1985, or quite where it is, but certainly this car is obliterated by all of that snow. I pity that man who had to do it. I'm sure that was very hard work getting that car dug out. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a look at these pictures. Just really a snapshot of what it was like to give you some idea. I appreciate a lot of people are watching this and probably weren't even born in the winter of 1985. That makes me feel very old, but I know there's a lot of people now that weren't born for that winter. So thought I'd just throw in a few pictures, show you what it was like, give a bit of a snapshot. But yeah, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed our historic video. It's probably going to be the last historic video that we do until Christmas. Christmas Day will probably be the next one. So that's it. Enjoy what's left of your bank holiday Monday. Don't forget to check out the methodology video for the winter forecast that I'm leaving on the homepage as well. I'm off and having a few days away now. So I'll be back to start updating the website again from the weekend. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your bank holiday Monday.